Today I'm going to show you how to add side seam pockets into pants. It could be into a skirt or into a dress. I mean, who doesn't love pockets? So when you do side seam pockets, you will need a generic sort of pocket pattern. And if you don't have one, it kind of, I always say, looks like a teardrop. So the wider and obviously the longer the teardrop, the bigger the pocket you'd have. You want an adequate hand opening. So just approximately for your reference, my hand opening measures just about 8.5 inches long, and the big pocket actual sort of teardrop is about 6.5 on this pocket pattern. You could borrow a pocket pattern from a different pattern that you have. I like to just trace out the generic pocket pattern and use it in a bunch of different applications such as these. So today I'm going to demo on pajama pants. So nothing new. The only thing that changes is that you need to have 4 pocket pieces. Okay, so when you cut them out, make sure you have 2 for the left pocket. So you're cutting it out with double thickness. So you get a left and a right on each. Okay, so I have 2 sets or 4 pockets. I searched around them because it's easier to do that if you have something to seam finish like a serger. That's easy to do. If not, you could pink the outside edge or zigzag stitch because once they're added to your pajama pants or your skirt, it's a lot more challenging to seam finish when they're attached. Okay, just for your reference here, I have my 2 back legs. Okay, I just have my front legs aside. This is the same piece. Essentially, this is my right back and this is my left back. And I've gone ahead and already serged down the outside leg. Okay, so that's that really long outside seam because that's the side where your pockets will be attached, right? Because that's your side seam. So your first step then is taking the correct pocket piece, and we always sew things right sides together. So you're going to have the teardrop or pointing down and the straight edge right against your side seam. Now these PJ pants are going to have a 2-inch casing, so I don't want to catch my pocket up into the casing actually because elastic's going to be fed through there. So I'm going to measure down, plus you want them to sit at hip height, and if these PJ pants are going to be worn at waist, you want to make sure that your pockets aren't going to be too high or too low for you. So I'm going to measure down 5 inches from the top here and then pin this piece in place. So I'm just going to spin my piece so you can see it a little closer. And you want to make sure each of your pieces, so I'm going to do 5. So I'm going to bring this sort of pocket piece up to the 5 line. Okay, and so that's, 5 inches. I'll move it just slightly up. Okay, and then I'm going to pin it in place, matching the 2 sort of serged edges there all the way down. Now I'm working with a pattern that has the 5/8 seam allowance. And so we are actually going to sew along the 1 centimeter or 3/8 seam allowance. Okay, so it's a narrower seam to start off with. So I'm just going to follow what's called my 10-line back stitch, go down and back stitch. Okay, and the reason we do a narrower seam allowance here to start is that when we actually sew our outside legs together, it stays tucked in. Okay, and it will make more sense once we get further on in this tutorial. So I've done 1. So essentially now I'm going to repeat this 4 times over. I'm going to grab the opposite pocket, okay, because again we want it to be on the outside leg, and you can see here this is my J, so that's my crotch, my long seam is my outside leg, and I'm going to measure this 5 down. You do not want to have 1 at 5 and 1 at 6, because then when you put your legs together you have mismatched pockets and the pockets won't align. So measuring and making sure that they're the same distance down is very important. So I'm putting it on the 5 right here, and wherever my tape measure ends, I'm going to place my pocket. Okay, and so the same thing, I'm going to repeat it by pinning this in place, just lining up the edges. And then we're going to repeat it for the front legs in the exact same manner. Okay, I have my front legs now face up. They look very similar to the back. The J is just, less deep. But again, because we did a cut 4 of our pocket piece, one will go to the outside seam on our front leg. And then the other one will go to the outside seam on our other front leg. Okay, so every leg will get a single little pocket piece attached. And again, if we made them 5 inches on the back, we have to make it 5 inches on our front. So whatever your measurement was for your desired height of your pocket, make sure that's consistently measured along all 4 of your pocket pieces so that your next step will be successful. So go ahead and pin your pockets to your front legs. And again, this would be like your front skirt or such if you're making a dress or a skirt. So like mentioned before, our seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch, or the 15 line on your throat plate. So when sewing the pocket onto the pant leg, we're actually going to follow a narrower seam allowance. So 3/8 or the 10 line, which stands for 1 centimeter. Okay, and so when we do that, it will keep our pocket hidden when we sew our outside legs together, when we actually sew our front leg to our back leg. Okay, so like normal, I always take about 5 stitches forward, 5 stitches back to reinforce the start of my seam, and we're just going to follow that 10 line all the way down till the end of our pocket. So we're only sewing this straight side. Click right here. So we're just following along the 10 line and along the straight side. So we're not turning and going around the curved part of the pocket. And when you reach the end of your pocket, you're going all the way up to the end, and you're going to do a back stitch and stop. Okay, so you're going to go ahead and do the same stitch. I'm just going to show you before we go ahead and do all 4. But there is my side pocket piece, and I've only sewn that one side. This is left sort of flapping. Okay, so what you should have now is 4 still separate legs, 2 front, 2 back, with these little pockets attached along this edge. Okay, so now you are going to go to the iron and you're going to press that seam away from itself, and so that it is really nice and smooth along each of the pocket seams. So now you have pressed your pockets away, they're nice and smooth. I have 2 front legs face up, because when we make pajama pants, we always pair our front leg with the back leg. Okay, we don't ever sew 2 front legs together. So I have 2 fronts face up, and now I'm going to grab my back leg. So I have one of my back legs here. I'm going to put it face down on the appropriate front leg so that my my J's are facing the same way and my pockets are on the same side. Okay, and now I'm going to pin only down the outside leg. I'm not going along the waist or anything else. So I'm just going here, and I'm going to line up my pockets so that that little intersecting seam matches and my pockets are the same height, and I'm going to put a pin in there. And then this should all match going up, because remember how we made that 5 inches. Okay, so now you'll check your accuracy, because that should lay nice and smooth, which it does. And you're going to just match your little edges together and put some pins in. Now don't really worry about the pocket right now. It's just going to hang out loose for the ride. Your next pin is going to come down at the bottom, and make sure this all lays nice and smooth, and one doesn't have a bubble in it. But you're going to match again the bottoms of your pockets, so right in there, and put a pin in to hold that in place. And now your pocket, they should line up, the edges of your pocket, if you didn't serge too much off, and should be the same shape. So now I'm just going to go down my leg here, and I'm going to pin my outside seam together, matching my raw edges, well, I guess they're serged edges, together. Okay, and you're going to pin all the way down to the bottom of your leg. Okay, so I have pinned down my entire outside of my leg. I've matched my top and bottom of my pocket, but I have not pinned around the actual pocket pouch, okay? Just leave that one loose right now until after we've sewn our outside leg. Now, I want to just really focus you in on where we started. We did this at the 10 line, and when we actually sew our outside seam, we're going to follow our 15 line or 5/8. And so you can draw yourself a little mark at 5/8 here. And so it's gonna go, they aren't intersecting, and I know that kind of drives you wild a little bit because you think they should match. But again, we did this inside because once we sew down at the 5/8, this remains tucked in so your pockets don't stick out on the outside and they remain hidden. Okay, and where you're gonna start, so you're gonna start up here at your 5/8 line. I'm gonna just approximately draw my seam allowance line here. Okay, you're gonna follow it on your seam guide on your machine, but you're gonna come all the way down, and then you're gonna go 5/8 past the top of your pocket. So kind of where the stitching starts. So where my red stitching starts, I'm going 5/8 past, and I'm just gonna draw like a little dot. And that's where I stop sewing till, okay? So I'm gonna back stitch, go all the way down, back stitch. Then I'm not gonna sew in here because this has to be left open for our hand. And then at the start again, I'm gonna start at the 5/8 seam guide. So it's gonna be just, you know, inside and not touching. And then again, from the end of my stitching or the end of my pocket, I am going to start. So I put my 5/8 line there. 5/8 represents 1.5 centimeters. So if you prefer measuring in centimeters, you're measuring up from the edge of your stitching or the edge of your pocket, 1.5 centimeters. And just give yourself a little dot there because that's going to be where you start. And then you're going to continue sewing all the way down the rest of your leg at your 5/8 and back stitching when you reach the very end. Okay, so again, there's just a break in our stitching between the dots because that's where our hand will be able to access our pockets. Okay, so we are going to start by following our 5/8 15 line here. And I marked it with pen, but that was just eyeballing. So I'm going to actually use my guidelines on my sewing machine to sew this. Okay, so 5 forward, 5 back. And then as you go down, you're just continuing to follow your 5/8, taking your pins out as you go. And we're going to go down until our dot. So again, we're not intersecting our seam, keeping your pocket out for the ride. Okay, and so I'm just continuing to follow 5/8 with the serged edge up until my dot. And on my dot, just take out that last little pin. On the dot, you'll do your little back stitch. Okay, and I'll show you this afterwards. Let me take it out, clip my threads. Fabulous. So our first seam on our leg looks like this. This is the top of our leg. I went down and I overlapped my stitching 1.5 centimeters past it. They do not meet. Okay, and so now I'm going to put it back in my machine, continuing to have the pocket out for the ride, and starting on my other dot and starting with a little 5 forward, 5 back, and then following my guideline again at my 5/8 the rest of the way down my outside leg. Okay, our last step in finishing off our pocket is now pinning around the actual pocket pouch. Okay, so again, I have no sewing in between my dots. So I'm going to keep those seams now flipped away. So I'm just going to take this 2 seam allowances like they were pressed this way, but I'm just going to tuck them towards the pant for a second. And now I'm going to pin around my entire pocket pouch. Okay, so around these curves. And then we're going to sew around this. And I'll just give you a tip on where to start and end here. So we'll finish pinning around here. Okay, so I've pinned along my pocket pouch and I've kept my seam allowances now facing this way. When you start sewing, we don't want to cross over our seam line. I'm going to try to zoom in here so you can see what I mean. So this is the 10 line that we did in our very first step, just to attach our pocket to our leg, and that's that sewing. We don't want to cross over it like this because we will create a pinch in our leg seam and it will be quite noticeable. So when you start, you're going to keep your seam allowances bent away on both sides here. So you're going to flip the underneath one away as well. So no seam allowances are getting caught up right now. And you're going to start 1 stitch away. So I'm going to just put a little dot there. Okay, so there's like the tiniest gap right at the top there where we're going to start. We're going to back stitch. We're going to go all the way around, you know, the lower part of our pocket. And then we're going to end, same thing, not catching any of the seam allowances on front and back. And we're going to end with a 1, you know, stitch little gap there too, so we don't cross over that red line and create our pinched point. Okay, so 5/8 is our seam allowance. We're just going to go around and do this whole sort of teardrop, starting and stopping 1 stitch gap from our seam. Okay, as I feed my pocket into my sewing machine, again, I just want to make sure that both seam allowances are flipped away from where we're going to sew so they don't get caught up. Because again, anything that gets caught up might pinch a little bit and pull our pocket in a way we don't want it to. Okay, so I'm right on my dot. I'm going to just start up with a couple stitches forward, a couple stitches back, and then following the 5/8 guideline all the way around your pocket. Okay, we're approaching the end point of our pocket. So again, I'm just tucking my fingers in and making sure that the seam allowances are pushed away. I'm still following my 5/8 seam guide as I sew. And then as I approach that little dot that was left there, I'm going to back stitch on the dot so that I don't cross my stitching past my stitching line. So I'll show this when I take it out here for you. So you can kind of see that we've gone and we've left a stitch gap there and a little, I'll clip my threads here, a little stitch gap here. So now that I've opened up my seam, it looks smooth, but my pocket is actually there. Okay, it's hidden in the seam right there. I'm gonna flip my pan over. There's my pocket. It's closed in. It's a functional little pocket in there. We want to press out that seam nicely just so it lays smoothly and it stays nice and concealed. Okay, so using a press cloth is always recommended. You're going to put a press cloth on top of that seam, give it a nice press, and all the way up to the top of that leg. And we want to always keep your pocket pouch facing forward, right? Because when we put our hands in our pockets, they go towards the front of us. It would be a little awkward if we press that pocket pouch to the back leg. And so we're going to just press this seam as well. Just going to reach in there to make sure my seam allowance is laying nice and smooth there. There we go. And press this one out as well. Okay, so when you're done, it should look like a seam and you don't even know where your pocket is, where it's like, where's my pocket? And there it is. So that's the quickest way, and I think the nicest way to add pockets into either pants or a skirt or a dress. You would now go and repeat this step of sewing the outside leg and around the pocket pouch on your other leg, because this is just one of our legs. So go ahead and do it on your other one. And then your assembly of your skirt or your pants is exactly like your pattern instructions. If you're continuing on to make PJ pants, please follow my other video on how to make the PJ pants, and that we would start to create tubes out of our legs. I hope this helps you and gets you excited to put pockets now into your garments that you sew.